Hello, my name is Audrey. I am so excited to share some great ideas with you on how to use Teams and Power Apps together. Today, I'm going to demonstrate to you how much we at Microsoft love combining services. So we love making solutions that work with Teams, with SharePoint, with Flow, and all of the components that you have right now back at your office so that you can create the perfect solution for your business environment. Today, I'm going to show you an interesting implementation of Teams and Power Apps together and Flow, which will be leveraging both the mobile device as well as the desktop. So I'm sure you're going to get a lot out of today's session. Let's get started. I want to start by kind of giving you some background into what the business scenario is. We're matching up Teams and Power Apps for the management of photos that are being taken outside. So what we have, you can imagine a construction project or some type of outside build project where we have environmental people who have to take photos of what's around the construction. Maybe they have to evaluate whether there should be a fence or evaluate whether the fencing that is there is appropriate. So they take a lot of pictures. But we want to make it easy for them to take those pictures without distraction and upload them directly to SharePoint. Now, in this particular scenario, I'm even going to abstract the situation of where these files need to be uploaded to. We're going to let Flow handle that 100%. And we're going to do that from a button in Flow on the mobile device. Next, once that file is uploaded, the newsletter team, so this is a team of people who are publishing the photos that are taken to newsletters, only when the environmental contact says it should be a newsletter photo. But they need to review it to make sure it's compliant. So they have to be very careful about what gets published in their newsletter because it's customer facing. So they review all the images via a Power App that I'm going to teach you how to make in just a few minutes. If while looking at these images inside the app, they realize there could be a compliance issue, then they can press a button in Power Apps, which creates a new channel in Teams so that everyone can discuss the compliance threat. Once they decide everything's cool and ready to go, then they can remark that image as ready for the newsletter. Flow will actually post the link and handle any approvals that need to be handled as well directly from SharePoint where all the data is being held. So this is a real collaboration of services in Office 365, and I bet you're going to think of different ways you can use this same scenario. So let me get into showing you basically how it works first, and then we'll break down what you'd have to do to make this yourself. So I'm going to go into my team site here, and you'll notice I have a simple team site called Project Controls, and then I have a tab here which is connected to my app. All right. Now this is the app we're going to build together, and all it will do is show all the images that are in a SharePoint library. To prepare for this, I made an image library or photo library on SharePoint, and I added 2 columns to it. So if I go to my library settings here, you'll see that I have a column called newsletter, yes or no. That's where they'll say this is an image for the newsletter. And I have a code column with a number. The number is what each environmental auditor has a certain code that they use that's related to the work breakdown structure. And so this will be a way for them to make a connection of these pictures to other data related to that work breakdown structure code in their Power BI dashboard. So everybody's really thinking ahead of how they can maximize the services in Office 365. So basically that's the first thing you'll have to do is make sure that your library is ready. Then we're actually going to make the workflow. And here's one of my favorite things about using Microsoft Flow is that I can build workflow solutions directly on my mobile device on my way to work, using my Carrier's account. So I really love that about Flow. So we'll do that together. Now the reason Flow is necessary is back to the team site. If I were to go click through this and I look at these images and I say, I don't want to put this image in the newsletter. It might be a problem because, and it could be any number of reasons. At that point, I can click this button down here, and you'll notice that once I click this button, What it does is exactly what it says. It creates a discussion channel. Those of you that were really watching the screen will notice that a channel popped up shortly after I clicked that button, and it's created a place where I can now track everything that's happening with that particular image. And I can have discussions, I can have online meetings, I can even share ideas as to what photos might be best to replace that one with, or I can just have a vote where we all just say, hey, let's just let that one go through, right? All of that can happen in my Teams channel without having to leave and go to SharePoint or leave and go to PowerApps. I can just do that work right here. And that's my favorite thing about Teams. It helps us consolidate like everything we have to get done in one place using multiple services. And this is a great example of that. So are you ready to learn how I did it? Let's get started with the flow button first, okay? So I'm going to switch to my phone. So here I am in my mobile device, and you can see that I have other buttons, right? Like I have buttons to tell me the weather. I have buttons to upload my receipts for my expense reports. But here's the flow we're going to make over here on the right. That's just called upload photos to a SharePoint folder. And I basically just used the template for this. Basically what I'm going to do is first it says, please select an image. And so I can go to my photo library and I can go to the place where I have all my outdoor images. Again, I'm pretending that I'm one of these environmental people. And I'm going to take a picture of this fence right here. There's a fence, right? And then I'm going to put my work breakdown number here. And then I'm going to decide, yes, this is for the newsletter. All of that UI is directly in Flow. I had no reason to make a Power App to do that. So now I'm going to say done. And behind the scenes, while that circle of hope is spinning, the flow has launched. And it is actually uploading that folder, that photo, to a SharePoint library. So I'm going to open up SharePoint Mobile. And here I am in my CM Checkpoint SharePoint site. And I'm going to just try and do a quick refresh here on the bottom. And we should see the third picture appear. And there it is. So in just a second, we'll see the whole picture. There we go. There's the new picture that I uploaded. What I love about this is not only did it upload the picture, but it also tagged it. It gave it our WBS code and it marked it as ready for newsletters. And so I was able to do all of that directly from my mobile device. So this is perfect for those people out in the field who don't really have a connection via a desktop or a laptop. They can just take these photos and upload it to the SharePoint list without even having to be bothered about which SharePoint site, which library, and how they should do that. Flow handled that whole exercise for them. So let me show you how we built that flow. I actually built this flow on my way to work. So Flow, one of the things I love about Flow is that you can build Flow solutions directly from your phone using your carrier service. So I'm actually going to go into the browse section here and I put the word photo in there so you can see there are a whole lot of buttons that start with uploading photos. And there's actually a template right here available to me called upload photos to a SharePoint folder. You can see this here, right here on the right here at the top. That's what I'm going to get started with to build my flow. So it's kind of like helping me already do most of the work. Most of the flows I built, I start with templates, and then I'm 80% complete when I open up my flow. So it needs a couple of things, right? So it knows I need to press a button, so it puts that trigger in there. And then it says you want to create a file. Okay, but tell me where you want it. So basically it asks for the site address, and this is going to go on my construction management site, which is called CM. And then it wants to know which folder, right? And if I drop that down, it tells me environmental photos. So now we know exactly where this file has to go. Now here's the good news, everybody. If all I wanted to do was to get that folder to a library, this flow is finished. I know you're amazed. That was less than a minute. But I want to also do some tagging. So I want to mark the WBS code, and I want to also make sure whatever they said yes, no on the newsletter also gets done dynamically. And this is where we'll start to use some of our dynamic tags. So I'm going to hit New Step and Add an Action. And I'm going to choose SharePoint because that's where my file is. Now what I want to first do is get the properties of my file. So there is a action here. You can see there's 41 SharePoint actions. Please check them all out. But I'm going to pick get file properties. It's important that I get properties, right? Now that I have the selection to get file properties, again, I'm going to pick the site. And you always look up at the top, it'll say done. Sometimes when you pick the library, like I've done here, notice I don't see my library. That can happen. Mostly it's because maybe the library is new, or maybe it's a special kind of library. Ours is a photo library. So I'm going to hit a custom value. It's important to start by hitting enter custom value. And now I'm going to spell out the name of my library, which is environmental photos. It must be typed exactly the way it's shown on SharePoint. Then I'm going to hit done. Now, here, as far as the ID of this properties, I want to use the ID of the file that we created just a few minutes ago. So you can see under create file, it gives us an item ID, which has a definition under it, the value that can be used to get update file properties. All right. And now I've got the right ID. Okay, so now I've got all my properties. Now here's the only problem. What I forgot to do, let's go back out here to this trigger. In the trigger, it doesn't ask any questions by default, but we wanted to ask 2 additional questions. What's the code and whether or not this is a newsletter, right? And we wanted to make sure to ask to please pick a file, right? So we're going to click the edit button here and notice that it starts by looking for image content. So that's perfect. I don't need to do anything else there. Thank you, Flo, for helping me. The next thing I'm going to do is find out what the code is. So I'm going to click on number, and I can rename this code, right? So that's my code, and it says, please enter a number. That's for my WBS code. The last thing I need is a yes or no value as to whether this is a newsletter image, because it could also be an incident report image. And notice how you can have lots of conditions in your flows. If it's a newsletter image, do this. If it's an incident report, do that. So now my trigger has all the things I want it to ask the customer. And so that works out really well. Now that I've got the right questions, I've got all the properties, now I'm going to add the final action, which is to actually update the SharePoint library. So I'm going to choose my SharePoint, and then I'm going to choose in the bottom, I'm going to select update, and I can start to type here if I spell correctly. I can type the word update, and it will look through all those actions. And you'll notice I have update file and update file properties. It's important to pick properties because that's what we want to change, the properties of the file. And in this action, again, I'm going to pick that site, making sure to select the same one. And then when it comes to the library name, if you don't see it, it has a lot to do with what type of library it is or how long it's been since it was created. In my case, this is a photo library, so it might not show up here. It's a special kind of library. So I will click Enter Custom Value. It's important that I start by clicking that. And then I can type the name of the list, the library, in the exact way that it's shown in SharePoint and hit Done. At this point, it wants to know what is the file ID. So I got that when I created the file. So that comes up as a dynamic property. I will pick that. Notice the description says the value that can be used to get or update file properties. This is important. I will select that. So now that I have all of that, now it wants to know what do you want to update. So we're going to, again, use our dynamic fields to fill in the blanks. We could select a title because some people forget to use titles, and I think it's not that important. We can always change it in our app. So I'm going to leave that alone. What's important to me is that I get this code in there that they typed. See that it's under manually trigger or flow, and that I get whatever they said for the newsletter. In this case, I'm going to click on Enter Custom Value and select what they picked in the newsletter. Now, if you ever have a situation where you don't see it here, this can sometimes happen. Just try clicking again, or you can use Enter Custom Value and type the name of the property. Okay, so now that I have that all done, Now my flow is completely finished. I'm going to just rename it something short and sweet. So this is my image or photo to SharePoint Online. I'll just do SPO. And now when I update this, it'll be saving the flow. And if I go to my buttons there, you'll see that I have the new button, Photo to SharePoint Online, which is going to work just like the other button did. I can select an image, I can enter a code, and I can say whether the newsletter is yes or no. When I do that, it's going to go to SharePoint. So this is how wonderful it is to use buttons on the Flow mobile device. Build your flows on your way to work, especially if you're in an Uber, and use them when you get there. So now we're going to go back to the computer and I'm going to show you the app that we're going to build really quickly. So here we are back on SharePoint and we're looking at our environmental photos library. What we're going to do is create an app for this library. I bet you didn't know that was possible, but let me show you how to do it. So starting at web.powerapps.com or your home page for PowerApps, you'll notice that we have a new Create tab. Click on the Create tab and then choose Start from Data. Now I'm going to do this as a mobile app, but you could do it as a mobile app and then convert it to a landscape app. It doesn't have to stay in the mobile format. And so now as soon as I click that, it wants to know where's your data. My data is on SharePoint, so I will pick SharePoint. And then what it wants to know is what's the site address. Everybody wants to know that, so we just have to keep track of what our site address is. Now, what's interesting is when I pick the site, it does not have that environmental library there. That's not a bug. It's because the library is an asset library or a photo library, so it won't show up here. Only custom lists show up here. But guess what? Just like we did in Flow, I can type the name of that library. It's important that I type it exactly the way it shows on SharePoint, and then I click Connect. And guess what PowerApps is going to do for me? Is it's going to build me an entire 3-screen app. I don't have to know how to use a formula. I don't have to know how to use anything. It builds with me a 3-screen app. And look, it's already done. In just in a minute, it has a 3-screen app. But we're going to kind of change it just a little bit. We're going to add some photos to it and kind of make it more interesting. So the first thing I like to do is theme my apps. So I tend to like brighter colors, but if you don't, look at all the different themes we have. You just pick the one you like, and now your app will be set to that theme, right? I'm going to use a theme with kind of a gray background. So I'm going to pick on, let's take this steel one, all right? Now, then I'm going to show you my favorite gallery controls. So a gallery is just a list. It helps you find what you're looking for. So this list is connected to that library. And since there's 3 pictures, we see 3 records. But we need to show the image in addition to the created time, which is on here, and maybe the code as well. But first, I'm going to do a little bit of formatting to create cards. So I'm going to go to the template, fill, and just type the word white there because I want the background of each row to be white. Then I'm going to go to template padding and put some space around them. So maybe 30 points of space. So right away I've got a more card look for my app. I can totally type up here, click up here and put a space between environmental photos or whatever I think I want to do. This is a lot like PowerPoint in that you have all these menus up here that you can use like bold, font size, all of that is up here, font color. So you can change these things very easily, just like you do in PowerPoint. Now, we're missing the photo here, so let's go get it. So the one thing I'm going to do is move this over. If you look up here, you can kind of see what this is, or I can select the gallery here, and over here on the right, I can pull out a panel just by hitting on Edit Fields, and I can re-choose different fields. Right? So right now I have 3 fields. I think I want the code to be in there. So that code that we entered and whether or not it should be a newsletter, which was another thing that we wanted to make sure we captured. And then we're not going to actually put a title in here, although we can leave this here as a placeholder. What I'm going to do is highlight all of the fields that are in that template area. And if you notice, everything I do in this top row happens everywhere. And I'm just going to move these 3 over. All right. Now for the code, I might want to put a prefix so that they know what number that is. So I can actually concatenate text. So I can type the word code here, hit the and sign, and now it'll say code, colon, and the code. If I want to, I can also do that for newsletter. I can say newsletter photo, colon. I also put a space just so that they're not too close. And now you can see that the newsletter photo is true in these two cases. The last thing I'm going to add is an image. So I'm just going to insert an image control from my media. Notice it appears everywhere. I'm going to size it and set the image position to full so that it takes up the whole space of that image control. I could also leave it fit. It's totally up to you. Phil may crop the image to make sure it fits in this space, all right? But then what's the image supposed to be? Well, in order to get an image in PowerApps, you just have to provide the URL. So what I'm going to do is say this item dot link to item. If I just start typing link, it'll show you that we have a property called link to item. And now you can see more clearly what I mean by the fill. So I can either size this down so that it kind of automatically fits, or I can set it to a fit. And now I have these images here. Now, if I run this app, it'll go from the first page to the detail page to the edit page. It kind of gives me everything I need. I did that for me, right, in those few seconds. But let's do a couple of changes to this as well. So on this screen, we have a display form. So I'm going to click on edit fields there, and I'm going to remove the modified field. And I'm going to also remove the preview field. I don't need it. I'm going to remove the title. Well, I'll leave the title field because I might use it later. The file type I'll take away. The picture size I'll take away and leave width and height. But I want to add a field that's not there. Remember our code and our newsletter? So I will click and add those two, code and newsletter. And it's just as easy as just click, 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 and there it appears. I can also say that I want this to be 2 columns to take up less space. You know why? I think I'm going to put the photo up here at the top, right? So I can insert another media control. And now I'm actually working outside of a display form. So I'm going to reference the gallery to tell me which image I'm looking at. So I'm just going to say browse gallery, whatever they selected, give me the link to item because that will give me back my image. And just for fun, this time I'm going to use the fill choice for the image position so you can see the big difference. You notice it did do a little bit of cropping. So now when we're here, you see the photos. And then when you're here, we see the photo and the details. I can also hit edit and edit these things here. Now, since I might want to edit the code, just like before, I'm going to select this, hit edit fields, and make sure I add anything here that I want to be able to edit from the app. By the way, while I'm doing that, you can access this app from your mobile device just like you did with the Flow build and use this directly from your phone. However, we're actually going to embed it on our Teams instance so that people can use the app in context with discussions. All right. So I think you get the point, but you would add whatever you need there, and then you'd be able to edit it there. All right. So let's embed this in the Teams instance. So first I'm going to save it. I'm going to give it a name. Let's just call this Picture Review App. And I will give it actually an icon that says a camera, right? Because they're taking photos. We give you a lot of icons you can use. So I don't suggest using the default icons because it does make it a little bit less discoverable. Now I'm going to save that. At this point, I want to share this app as well with the team. But for this demo, I don't have a team actually. This is just a demo. I'm just going to close this down. So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit and hit the close button. And now I'm off to Teams to embed that app in my Teams instance. So here I am in Teams, and you saw it earlier, but just to show you how I did that, I'm going to click on the environmental compliance channel, which is where we'd like to manage this. And then I'm going to add another Power App here, which is the one that we just built. I have one more thing to add to that app, but I just wanted to do this firstly. We're going to embed this so you can see that once you embed it, even changes you make to the app afterwards will continue to show up in your Teams instance. I love the idea of this being contextually available for me, because now if I'm thinking about reviewing these images and I need to talk about it more, I can do that right in harmony with this screen. I can even include this in a meeting recording, for instance, if I wanted to show off what we did. Now, what I'm going to do though is I'm going to make a last change to the app, because here's what I want to happen. Whenever I find an image that I think might not be compliant, something is up with that image, I want to be able to make a brand new channel to discuss that. And so let's add that button. And this is going to be also very easy to do. So I go back to my PowerApps app and I reopen it. Now that we have the app reopened, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to add a button to this screen that will actually create a new channel in Teams. We use a connector for that normally. Today I'm going to show you how to use it with Flow. We'll put some details in the description with some other videos that show various ways to do this. I'm going to pick the easiest one today. That way, even if you're new to PowerApps, you should be able to do this without a problem. I'm going to insert a button on this screen and move it down to the bottom of the screen. Then I'm going to remove the rounding of the corners just because I want it to be completely square. And I did that by decreasing the border radius to 0. So I'll just zoom in a little bit so you can see over here in the right margin. I have a border radius at 0 now to make my button square. Now what my button says comes from the text property. So I can do that either from the formula bar or over here on the right in the properties panel. I can see the text property there and change this to create discussion channel. So what this button is going to do when I click it is going to create a channel in Teams where we can discuss this image. So I'm going to actually leverage Flow again, this time directly from PowerApps. I'm going to click on Flows and create a new flow. When I do that, it's going to launch me into Flow, and it's going to create the initial trigger because the trigger is PowerApps. And I'm going to actually look for my Teams connector. We have over 200 connectors that you can use to connect to a variety of data from within your app. I'm going to choose the one that is called Create Channel. So you'll see it says Create a Channel. I'll click on that. And now I can pick what team ID. I only have one in this case, so I'm going to pick Project Controls. And then what do I want the display name to be? I can ask for this in PowerApps in order for it to be dynamic. But in this case, I'm just going to call this Discussion Channel. And basically, that's going to instantly create the channel. I can put a description here. This is to discuss non-compliant images. Okay, and basically now that I have a channel, I can do a whole bunch of things, like even post a message. So I can click on this again, choose Teams, and now you see that I have a post messages. What's the team ID? Again, this is my Project Controls team. What's the channel ID? Well, actually, it's the channel ID from up here that I created, that I just created. So how do I get the ID from what I just created? I click in here and I say enter custom value. You remember that from earlier. And notice under create a channel, that particular section has unique ID of the channel. It is best that I put that in dynamically. That way it always adds the message to the channel that I just created. And then here, please review the image. And I think with the display name, I think I might go ahead and ask in PowerApps. The reason is because I'd like the display name to be unique each time. So I'm going to go ahead and add that from PowerApps, and just basically I can click PowerApps and say ask in PowerApps. Now it's going to ask me what I want the display name before I click the button. So we're going to configure the button so that it gives a dynamic display name. All right, and that's all I need to do, except maybe let's name it. Let's call it new button for pick, right? And then save. And now that we've saved it, we're going to just go back to our PowerApp app, and you should be able to see it in the list of flows at the bottom. It'll just pop up. I don't know if you noticed that. Then I click add, it will add it. Now what it wants me to do is tell it, where do I get that display name? Remember I said ask in PowerApps? So I'm going to use the gallery. I'm going to use the gallery that we picked the image from. So I'm going to say browse gallery 1.selected, and I'm going to use the code as the channel name because those are normally unique, but I'm going to add to it the ID of the image. So I can use an and sign here. I can do browse gallery 1.selected.id. The two of those things together will make a unique team channel name. That is extremely important because you cannot create a channel with the same name of a channel that exists. So I had to make this display name unique. All right. So now basically, if I play this app, let's go pick one of these photos. Let's pick this one and just say create discussion channel. And then if we go back to our team site, you'll notice that we have that new discussion channel waiting for you to talk about that image. And that's how easy. I think the only thing I would have done differently that I did before is I put a dash in front of the 3. So, and basically that is simple as in this code here, instead of just and directly the ID, I would do and open quote dash, close quote and now I've actually put a dash. And so that would be the perfect way to drive that. So all in all, what we've done is we've said, okay, let's take a problem, a business problem like a field representative needs to upload a folder. Let's make that easy. We did that using our mobile device and creating a flow. Then the next thing we did was we set up our app in PowerApps against that list so that we could edit the properties of the images and also review them to make sure they were compliant. Now then we extended the app that was automatically generated for us so that it would create discussion channels for us if we decided, that image might not be compliant. All of that by leveraging these wonderful tools that you own, that you should take advantage of, because that was entirely so easy. And I think back, personally, I've been doing this for a long time. I think back even 5 years. That might have taken a week using code to coordinate all those different services together, get them working, talking to SharePoint, talking to Teams, making sure our IDs were all unique and blah, blah, blah. Now we can do it in just minutes. So give it a try. Make sure you leave any comments as feedback below so that we can get back to you if you have any difficulty doing this. I look forward to coming back and talking to you again because this stuff is amazing. And we're going to have a nice deck for you in order for you to be able to see some, documentation on what I did because I moved pretty quickly, and also some links to where you can learn more. It's been a pleasure being with you, and I look forward to our next event.